Hello, everyone. Welcome to the political education campaign. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today, our political education campaign will be circling around voters' education. This political education campaign is rooted with Knowing Alameda County. It's an impactful workshop that aims to support formerly incarcerated folks and first-time voters to understand who can vote, how to register, and also just valuable information about these decision processes, right, and making as well. And I also just would like the announcement that this event is being live streamed to our GRCAC accounts, as well as being recorded to be lived on as a resource for the future. So thank you all so much. Let's go ahead and get started with some icebreaker. I asked all of the attendees to drop this icebreaker in the chat with your name, pronouns, and your organization, along with answering one of this check-in. And I'm gonna pass it on to our panelists, which is Cynthia Nunes, Natasha Mejia, John Cannon, and Danny to kick us off with this icebreaker. Cynthia, I'll pass it on to you.
Thanks, Raylan. Hi, everybody. My name is Cynthia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with Restore Oakland. My first experience voting, I just remember being so excited that I was like finally at age to vote. And all my friends are older than I am. I was the youngest in my class, so like they all got to vote and I didn't. So yeah, I don't know, I just remember feeling like really proud and excited because like my mom has never been able to vote. My dad hadn't been able to vote due to past histories of the system not allowing people with felonies to vote. So it was just like a really proud moment for me. Super excited. And a bill I'd like to propose if I could. I think this may have been proposed before, but officers with any misconduct background to be fired and never be allowed to be police officers or anything of that sort ever again. Yeah, so I will pass it over to John.
Hello, everybody. I'm John Cannon. I use he, him pronouns. I'm with Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, and the first time I've ever voted is I haven't voted yet, and if I could propose a bill, it would also be a bill that's already proposed, and that's to end involuntary servitude inside of prisons. And I will pass it to Danny.
Hey, you guys, Danny Tongsi, he, him pronoun. Yeah, I'm just thinking about voting, right? Because I myself am I'm an incarcerated person. But the interesting thing about it is that I'm not a citizen. So with that being that I'm ineligible to vote, I don't have the right to vote. And yeah, and I remember when I was working at Oakland Rising, you know, doing voters outreach, what was interesting is that I myself, you know, can't vote, but yet I believe in the power of, you know, voting, especially restoration of voting. So that's why I, you know, I believe that all of our voice matter. That's why I, you know, I did what I did, you know, by reaching out to folks that can vote to vote. And regarding something, I think policy-wise, I believe that you know, I want to see changes as far as you know, even though that folks that legally, you know, don't have documentation and so forth, they can have voting power or, you know, a say so, especially, you know, regarding the system and so forth.
I can go ahead and do my check-in. My name is Natasha Mejia. I'm a policy analyst at the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform, and I use she, her pronouns. So my first experience voting was very liberating. It was a little nerve-wracking, just reading everything, getting used to, you know, seeing all the stuff that's on the paperwork, but it was liberating. To be able to have my voice matter. And then if I could propose a bill, I mean, there's so many. I love the bills that were already proposed in this conversation, but I would like to see the expansion of voters' rights be more widely accessible. Thanks.
Thank you so much to all the panelists for sharing. And just due to time also, thank you for everyone for checking in via the chat also. I'll go ahead and check in as well. My name is Raylin Aguado. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with the GRC AC. Thank you all so much for checking in. So we're gonna go ahead and kind of break down the agenda for today. So as you know, we just had our icebreaker. We'll do introductions of what GRCAC is, how this campaign even got started, and to also talking a little bit about what is electoral power within our community, and also the eligibility requirements, as well as Proposition 17. Then we'll go ahead and direct the conversation to our panel of who you have just heard from today, and also just asking questions from their experiences. And then we'll close with a call to action. I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic to Danny to talk a little bit about GRCAC.
Yeah, thank you, Raylan. Once again, good morning, everybody. My name is Danny Thongsti, as pronoun he, him, his. I am the campaign coordinator for the Justice Reinvestment Coalition of Alameda County, in short, the JRC. So just a little bit about the JRC. The JRC is a coalition comprised of community-based IFC organization committed to creating a fair and just public safety system based on effective practices that invest in our community, our family, and our people. So basically, our motto is to divest and reinvest back into our community. So we are currently working with our allies on several campaigns targeting justice key stakeholder here in Alameda County. For example, probation, sheriff, DA, board of supervisor, public defender, and judges. These are the key stakeholders of folks that we are targeting our campaign towards. As far as our campaign, these are our campaign for youth justice. We work with the Free Our Kids Coalition, which to propose a plan to build a youth justice system that prioritizes the prevention of the criminalization and incarceration of children and building youth leadership. And for the adult and mental health side, we have been working with the Incarcerated Alameda County Coalition to implement the Care First Health, which focus on prioritizing mental health over incarceration. And we have also been working with our DA Accountability or Participatory Defense campaign team, who also meet with the public defender and also the district attorney to hold, especially the district attorney, to hold them accountable in a sense, with their practices. And for our reentry group, we also have been working around AB 109, which is to really try to expand resources, especially to our community that have been system impacted and that are currently home. And right now we're educating our public with our political education campaign. So this is one of the mini workshops that we're focusing on. So for today's presentation, it is part of our political education campaign. So just a little bit about the political education campaign and how this came about was that during the November election, many people, especially our community members, were interested in the election, especially the presidential election. But when it comes down to local law, policy, and stakeholder, which didn't have direct local and county impact on our livelihood, our community are not aware of it. So with this campaign, we hope to educate and empower our community because these stakeholders that we're holding accountable, they make decisions that have direct impact in our lives. And I believe that the decision that they make or the policy that they create should benefit our community, because at the end, our community is the one that suffer. So for more information and update on our current campaign, our political education campaign, and our other campaign, you could go to our website at jrcofac.org, or you could check our JRC upcoming political education campaign at #NoAlamedaCounty. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny. And in regards to moving forward with this workshop, we also wanted to give light to what is electoral power. And for us, what that looked like is the relationship between value of a person's vote in one state and in another too, because every state has a minimum of 3 electoral votes, regardless of its population. So electoral power is just then really rooted into community, right? We also wanted to share this quote from MLK, which states that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter, just amplifying the fact that the value that voting is then sharing your voice, right, on an electoral level, and just making sure that the communities that they do serve are heard, right? We wanted to pass the mic along to Oakland Rising to give a background about Proposition 17 and this map. So if Liz Sook is in the call, please feel free.
Hi, Raylan. Thank you. Thank you all. So this is actually a map of, so let me start by saying that my name is Liz Sook. My pronouns are they, she. I'm the executive director for Oakland Rising. We build political power in the flatlands of Oakland and are beginning to expand our electoral work into Alameda County more broadly. We do this by flexing people power through our civic engagement programs, as well as aligning with like-minded forces through coalitions and a collaborative model that we do with the JRC and with other partners. And we also build leadership through a values-based leadership model. And so through our IVE work for integrated voter engagement work, we do, not only do we do canvassing and phone banking that reaches out to and garners about 60,000 voter supporters. So these are voters throughout Oakland and Alameda County who tend to vote with us on issues. So one of the issues last year was Prop 17, and this was to return the right to vote to formerly incarcerated folks. And so this map is actually a map showing you how people voted throughout Alameda County. And why is this important for us to talk about where and how people voted? Is because it gives us an idea about where people generally lie on any given issue. So when we look at giving the right to formerly incarcerated folks as a measure towards could they be more likely to support decriminalization or decarceration efforts, that they would be more likely to vote in that direction. And so it gives us an idea. So when we look at overall voting patterns in Oakland, we see that, throughout Alameda County, that Oakland weighs very heavily on the overall vote in Alameda County on any given measure. We garner about 60% of the whole Alameda County vote. And as you can see on this slide, the darker purple colors indicate that there's larger number of supporters, and the lighter colored purple, or even the lighter off colored white, shows where you have less support. So you can imagine further out into Livermore and parts of broader areas in little pockets throughout Alameda County, we had 0 to 50% of the electorate voting in favor of Prop 17 last year. And the very dark purple showing 90 to almost 100%. So we can see these pockets of that. But the majority of Alameda County really voted in a way that showed that they are between 50 to about 90% in favor of allowing formerly incarcerated folks to vote. So why is this important? Again, is to look at and see where can we begin to build power. We have power in Oakland because much of the groundwork and the work that Oakland Rising does, but many of our partners, we have been building power, electoral power. And like Danny said earlier, he had been part of our team to go door knocking and to canvass and phone bank and talk to voters, even as someone who didn't have the right to vote. And through that, we were able to build a really strong base. And so one of the things that's really important in the work is being able to reach out to communities and looking at these type of voting patterns to see where should we be focusing our attention. We can see here that we are going to begin to building more of a stronger base and hoping to do a lot more political education into areas broadly into Alameda County, but focusing much of our work in unincorporated as well as South County. So around Cherryland, Ashland, Hayward, and then moving down south through Union City, Fremont over the next few years. And so how you could do that is to join us. Join us where you see where you want to be able to lend your voice, to talk to voters, and not only talk to voters, but talk to non-voters as well. Let them know that they know a voter. Every non-voter knows a voter. Every voter knows a non-voter, right? And in terms of a registered voter. So this is our ability to get out there and really talk to folks and to really weigh heavily on issues. For example, right now, we're looking at what's happening in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and the judge really leading a court hearing in favor of Rittenhouse, who was eventually acquitted, that we learned today. So when we look at how judges are elected in Alameda County, when we look at how DAs are elected, when we look at how our sheriff is elected in Alameda County, we need to be supporting and pushing our voters who are mostly impacted by this throughout Alameda County. So we hope that you will join us. If you don't mind going to the next slide, Raylan, you can join us by following us on all of our social media. You can go to oaklandrising.org and sign up for a newsletter, because there will be many opportunities, particularly next year through 2022, to talk to voters about issues like this, about the DA, about the impact of the criminal justice system on our communities. And we would love to have you come out there with us and door knock, because this is actually how we win power. And we can win it because in Alameda County, our voice is actually the voice of the people. And so we hope that you'll join us in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. We're going to go ahead and transition and talk a little bit about eligibility and requirements. So we've given briefly about what electoral power is, right? And also where Proposition 17 lies, county to county. So we also just want to highlight the value of registering to vote and what that looks like. So right now in the United States, to be able to vote, specifically, these are the rules for California. You must be a US citizen and a resident of California. You must be 18 years old or older on election day. And you are not currently serving a state or federal prison. We'll talk more a little bit about the rights of formerly incarcerated folks also later on. To also pre-register to vote in California, you must be 16 or 17 years old, meet all of the other requirements, and automatically register vote after your 18th birthday. As for individuals in the state of California who are incarcerated in prison and on parole, unfortunately you cannot vote because of the lack of education and restored rights of formerly incarcerated people. Many don't know that individuals with criminal convictions, including those on probation, can actually do vote. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So a little bit of the eligibility and requirements for those with a criminal record can actually vote, right? In a county jail, if you're serving a misdemeanor or sentence, or if you have time in jail and it's a condition of probation, misdemeanor or felony, serving a felony jail sentence or awaiting trial, these are some of like the requirement, like eligibility that you can actually vote, right? If you're on probation, on mandatory supervision, as well as post-release community supervision and federal supervised release, you're actually eligible to vote. However, there are still restrictions on those who can't vote. So currently imprisoned by state or federal prison, unfortunately cannot. and also those who are currently serving a state prison felony sentence in a county or other correctional facility. Currently in county jail, awaiting to transfer to a state, in a county jail for parole violation, parole with the California Department of Corrections. And once you are done with your parole, your right to vote is actually restored, but you must register online, and the link is noted here as well. And we'll also have a resource so you can actually scan the QR code later on to have all of these information as well. To register to vote by filling out a paper voter registration card. So we wanted to talk a little bit also like about your rights and your Bill of Rights with voting. So we're gonna go ahead and play this quick video.
Hello, California voters. Did you know you have the following rights? You have the right to vote if you are a registered voter. You are eligible to vote if you are a U.S. citizen living in California, registered where you currently live, at least 18 years old, not currently serving a state or federal prison term for the conviction of a felony, and not currently found mentally incompetent to vote by a court. You have the right to vote if you are a registered voter, even if your name is not on the list. You will vote using a provisional ballot. Your vote will be counted if elections officials determine that you are eligible to vote. You have the right to vote if you are still in line when the polls close, and the right to cast a secret ballot without anyone bothering you or telling you how to vote. If you have not already cast your ballot, you can get a new ballot if you have made a mistake. Ask an elections official at a polling place for a new ballot, or exchange your vote by mail ballot for a new one at an elections office or at your polling place, or vote using a provisional ballot. You have the right to get help casting your ballot from anyone you choose, except from your employer or union representative. If you vote by mail, you can drop off your completed vote by mail ballot at any polling place in California. You have the right to get election materials in a language other than English if enough people in your voting precinct speak that language, and the right to ask questions to elections officials about election procedures and watch the election process. You have the right to report any illegal or fraudulent election activity to an elections official or the Secretary of State's office. If you believe you've been denied any of these rights, call the Secretary of State's confidential toll-free voter hotline at 800-345-VOTE. That's 800-345-8683. For more information, visit sos.ca.gov and be sure to register to vote at registertovote.ca.gov.
So thank you everyone for kind of watching a little bit about our voter Bill of Rights, and just wanted to highlight that, right? Something that Cynthia also shared in the chat, right? Some folks who are formerly incarcerated sometimes also don't know about how to kind of reclaim their voting rights as well, right? And also please feel free to drop in the chat any questions you may have, as we will have time in the panel for a Q&A as well. So kind of talking a little bit about also how to register to vote, and just a reminder that Californians must be registered to vote at least 15 days before Election Day. However, if the registration deadline has passed for the upcoming election, you can still visit your county elections office, a voting center, or a satellite office designated by your county elections to be able to cast a vote. Any registered voter in California can actually decide whether to vote at a polling place or actually vote by mail, just making sure that the next election cycle will be in June 7, 2022. So that also entails that your registration must be postmarked and submitted electronically no later than May 23, 2022. So how to register to vote, like we mentioned, you can find out if you're currently registered to vote through this online site that will actually generate if your voting status. And you can vote either by online or by mail. So you can apply through the site online, or you can also apply by paper mail to obtain a paper voter registration application. You can also pick up these application essentially in the office, a library, a DMV, or US Post Office. Like I mentioned, this just has to be filled out, submitted 15 days before election. You can also request them by calling this hotline to have them be mailed to you directly to your home. So how to register to vote for folks who are formerly incarcerated. Voting rights are restored automatically once released from prison and discharged from parole. Individuals convicted of a felony are ineligible to vote while in prison and on parole. However, voting rights are automatically restored upon release from prison. So people on probation can vote. If the above applies to you, you should re-register to vote. And how to vote in jail. So submit a voter registration for an absentee or vote by mail request in the jail through coordinated voter registration initiatives. So some important dates to remember, like I mentioned, we do have some elections coming up. So October 5th to November 2nd is early voting. And then October 9th is voter registration deadlines. By October 27th is when the absentee ballot deadline is due. And November 3rd is actually election day. So again, like we mentioned, we also want to highlight the resources if you missed the deadline to register to vote. So you can still register to vote by going to the offices in your county, right, to verify your voter registration as well. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the timeline on what you can vote on and also how kind of like the cycle of voting goes. So for the voting timeline, we vote on a couple of factors, right? Federal, congressional, and presidential elections. So presidential elections take place every 4 years. We just had one last year for the Biden and Trump administrator. And then congressional elections take place every 2 years. While local elections like kind of vary, right? It can take place any year at various times throughout the year. With the passing of Chan, they're likely going to have a voting sometime soon. And there also are voting for the district attorney from my knowledge, right? We wanted to highlight this resource as well for scanning this QR code to learn about the roles in Alameda County. So within GRCAC, our coalition has worked collectively and kind of like putting on these roles about the DA, knowing Alameda County, what's tied to the political education campaign, knowing about the different roles in Alameda County and how that impacts our community. So I'm just gonna give some time, maybe 30 seconds for folks in the call today to highlight and scan that QR code if you're able to. Thank you, everyone. And we're just going to go ahead and continue with the presentation. So we wanted to also highlight that most of our resources today and the valuable information we're talking about is actually derived from the Young Women's Freedom Center. And they've actually collaborated with us on this workshop. So we just wanted to give gratitude to that. We also want to highlight that to be an informed voter, to make sure you're registered to vote, know how to read your ballot, and also research the upcoming candidates for that will be on the ballot, right? And knowing also your rights and where to vote for that. Now we're going to be talking a little bit about Proposition 17, what that is and how kind of like that came into the vote. Liz Suck from Oakland Rising to talk a little bit about Proposition 17 and where the county lies for this. And now we're just going to talk a little bit about what that entails.
A convicted felon who's on parole cannot vote in California. Proposition 17 asks voters if parolees should have the right to vote. California is one of only 3 states that requires people convicted of felonies to complete both prison and parole sentences before regaining their right to vote. California voters approved that law 46 years ago. Parolees are disproportionately minorities. Prop 17 would allow voting rights when a person completes their prison term, but they are still on parole. People on probation already have the right to vote. A parole commission report says citizens whose vote is restored after prison are less likely to commit future crimes. Parolees still need to be 18, a U.S. citizen, a California resident, and a registered voter. Opponents say Prop 17 allows parolees to vote before paying their debt to society, denying justice to their victims. A voting rights group did a survey last year and estimated about 40,000 California parolees would have their vote restored if Prop 17 is approved.
Hello, I'm Mark Brown. Get more great ABC7 content by clicking the subscribe button for our...
So just wanted to share that little background of where Proposition 17 was like a year or two ago. And right now Proposition 17 is actually in place, right? So that was just something that they've kind of explained of where it was when the bill was being passed. Now we're going to open up our panel into a Q&A as well. And I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. So we have Natasha Mejia from NICJR. We have Jan Cannon from All of Us or None, and as well as Cynthia Nunes from Restore Oakland. So we're going to go ahead and kick off the panel to start with Cynthia Nunes. And I'm going to ask this question, which asks, why is voting at a local level significant? Cynthia, go ahead. I'm going to pass the mic to you.
Thanks, Raylan. I think voting at a local level, I think like now more than ever, like our young folks need like strong, dependable people like in representation to count on. If we want any type of reform, if we want to fight the criminal justice system, that has to start locally. Just look at how many folks turned out during the uprising of the protests last year fighting for George Floyd. Like that right there is community. And the people in the streets here in Alameda County weren't just marching for George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. They were marching for people here. They were marching for the Augie Gonzalez's, the Mario Gonzalez's, the Oscar Grants, the Salim Tyndalls, you know. So I think like just remembering that these things are happening locally, they're happening in our backyards. It's important for us to have the right representation. Another thing is looking at gentrification is local. That's happening here. It's happening in the streets of Oakland. Who are we voting for and what are their stances on that? Are they looking for paychecks? Are they looking for money? Are they looking to keep our communities in store and like represent folks? So I just think it's really important for us to like remember that things start locally. It's important for us to check out who we're voting for, to check in with what's happening here. In order for us to make a bigger picture, we have to start small. So yeah, appreciate you all for being here. Also just like want to point out, sending everybody like so much love and light and like hoping that y'all are really like holding your peace today with the decisions in the Rittenhouse verdict, and yeah, protect your peace.
Thank you so much for that, Cynthia, and for sharing your experience as well. We're gonna go ahead and move on to our next question to Natasha Mejia, which asks, what is the history of discrimination in voting and why is this important? Go ahead, Natasha.
Thanks, Raylan. So again, my name is Natasha, and I just wanted to talk about some of the history of discrimination in voting, because I think it provides really great context to why, why we're here today and the significance to why Proposition 17 is so powerful. And so we can go all the way back, to the abolition of slavery with the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, which returned rights to citizenship for enslaved people, and then the 15th Amendment, which granted the right for Black men to vote back in the 1800s. And so even though Black men were technically allowed to vote, they were systematically turned away from state polling places. States put in place poll taxes, literacy tests, and intimidation to really turn people away from the voting polls, which was really detrimental to building up wealth and community. And, finding those ways around the Constitution really prevented voting, voting for folks. So it wasn't until 1965 with the 25th Amendment, which reinforced the right to vote for Black Americans by prohibiting the use of poll taxes, literacy tests, and other methods of excluding Black folks and other people of color from voting. And so how this kind of connects with Proposition 17 and also with mass incarceration, which is really important to understand, is that the 13th Amendment outlawed the enslavement of Black people in the United States, but the US really continued to devise new ways to uphold this racial hierarchy. And so slavery was found constitutional if you had committed a crime. So the criminal legal system has continued to use and extract labor from people today who are engaged in the system. And then after the civil rights movement, there was another really intentional wave of political attack on Black Americans and other minority folks in our country with the war on drugs, which was the series of tough on crime policies that really targeted BIPOC communities and really fueled mass incarceration. And so if we understand that mass incarceration is really just an extension of slavery, and is yet just another tactic to maintain this hierarchy. And we can really understand that voter laws that restrict people with felony convictions from voting is just another way to systematically turn people away from engaging in political power. So, Prop 17 is so important because it really helps break down some of those discriminatory barriers that were created to uphold this hierarchy, which is really huge. As other people said, voting is so important because it really allows us to kind of have a say in how we live our lives. And what impacts us. So, restoring the right to vote for people with felony convictions is a huge step towards liberation. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for that, Natasha. Beautifully said. And we're going to go ahead and direct our last question to John Cannon, which asked, as a formerly incarcerated youth, how has this affected your perspective about your rights as a voter? And go ahead, John, I'll pass the mic to you.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Raylene. It's really had a profound impact, like, on my thoughts toward voting, because even as I said in the check-in question, I've never voted. I was incarcerated at 16, so even getting out, I had been on parole the whole time, so I couldn't vote. So it really had a big impact on how I thought about voting, how I looked at voting, and even being incarcerated, seeing so many people that looked like me or come from similar backgrounds as myself. It just made me think that we had no voice at all in this, and it was hard to even make myself feel a part of a society in which I didn't even have the right to vote in. So it's just always I've been excluded from the vote for a long time. And thank you.
Thank you so much, John, for sharing that, and also hoping that you can vote sometime soon as well. I want to direct some attention also to the chat because I do know that there's been some questions that I'll direct to the panel. I believe Cynthia answered this in the chat. If you can just maybe share the answer as well. I'll read off the question. From Jalen, she asked, are people who are interested to vote in another state able to vote through provisional ballots in California? And Cynthia, I'll pass that on to you.
Yeah, I'm not like 100% sure on this answer, just for clarity. I do know that with provisional voting that you have the opportunity to vote when like maybe you've moved addresses and haven't quite like put that into place yet, or I think you also can, depending on if you're moving to California. I'm not sure if this was like a question of like maybe you're visiting or you're moving. You can apply that day or re-register that day as well with your new information to vote in California. So there definitely are ways around that. There shouldn't really be much stopping you from being able to vote. I think what happens is a lot of the times, even the workers that are working these polls like don't really know what the answers are. So a lot of the times they're turning folks away when there are ways around that. There is provisional voting ballots. There's a lot of things that you could be doing. Again, I don't quote me on it. I don't know if someone else here on the panel has a little more information, but I'm pretty sure that you still have that opportunity.
Opening it up to anyone on the panel who'd like to add, but I do know that that does exist, the provisional ballots do exist. So thank you for that, Cynthia. Another question that came on the chat asked from Miela, sorry if I'm butchering your name. She asked, what strategies have been successful in reaching and messaging formerly incarcerated communities with information about their voting rights? And I do know within our panel, we have organizers as well. So I wanted to just direct that and leave that open for anyone on the panel who may be able to answer. Maybe Natasha or John, if you're able to.
Yeah, I would say that with all of us are none in LSPC, we have a lot of membership on the inside and outside, and members that are directly or systemically impacted. So we like to share that information with our members and trying to get people involved in the vote and just educating people and letting them know their new rights from Proposition 17, and so just getting the word out and educating the folks.
Thank you so much, John. I also do want to highlight, right, within the coalition as well, we have various partners, including All of Us Are None, as well as like I do know like Courage also works with youth who are formerly incarcerated as well, that are kind of like doing that like movement power and like that community building, right? Assuring that these communities also do know their rights and like holding spaces like this, like we have now, like the voters education. Our hope is then this resources can live on in the GRCAC sites as resource as well for others to kind of watch and engage and enrich their knowledge, right, about voting. And also just then for all of our partners to utilize these resources for their own internal networks as well to reach different communities as well. And the last question on the chat asked from Jalen asks, I think that there are over 100,000 Californians who are currently incarcerated. Are there any efforts to allow them to vote while in prison? And I'm not sure if you would know, but I'd like to direct this to Natasha if you have any you'd like to add on that.
I actually don't know the answer to that question, but you know, if you are in prison, you are not eligible to vote, which is a huge barrier. And so, you know, that'd be a really great piece of legislation for us to push and expand the, you know, the access for people, you know, to vote, not just in county jails or people who have committed misdemeanor violations, but people who have committed felony violations and are in parole. In prison. So yeah, I don't know any of the efforts. I think, you know, John mentioned some of the work that he's doing with folks who are currently incarcerated. And I think building up the capacity to really, you know, push forward this narrative and this understanding and this, you know, this education to folks will really arm people to be engaged in voting.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And also, Cynthia, did you want to add something else?
Yeah, just to add too on top of that is just like remembering that like folks can fill out an absentee ballot as well, depending again if they're serving a felony sentence in a prison. Unfortunately, they're unable to vote, but in county jails or whatever the case might be where they are eligible to vote, that is an option to fill out an absentee ballot. However, getting access to the internet while incarcerated is difficult. And so the accessibility to be able to do that makes it really hard for folks. And that's just aside from like a lot of folks not even having the knowledge that they're able to do that or what their voting rights are. So it doesn't really answer your question, but I'd love to encourage folks to like get plugged in with different organizations like All of Us or None, or I know that like Ella Baker Center has like a prison mail night that like maybe, I don't know if that's like a topic that's covered, but just like getting involved with like your different community organizations to follow up on these questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for all of that. I also want to share something that was shared on the chat as well. Oscar Flores shared that All of Us Are None strategies to ultimately have everyone to be able to vote currently with incarcerated folks as well. And Angela also did share an article on the chat. So just want to highlight that as well. So thank you everyone for all your questions. Since we do have granted time, we're going to go ahead and move forward with our next set of panelist questions. I'm going to direct this to Cynthia, which asks, what can folks do between and beyond elections?
Thanks, Raylan. I think like what's really important is continuing the momentum outside of election season. A big advocate of like community organizing, having a group of people working together and advocating for your community is like a really key thing to be doing. It's exhausting, it's hard, I'm not gonna lie to y'all, but real change happens when we all work together, we make our voices heard. Building people power, the more of us that get together and do this work together, the better the outcomes come that come from that. I mean, just look at like the last year and a half to 2 years alone and the changes that we've made across the country, but in just Alameda County alone, look at the wins that we've seen in Hayward, with mobile crisis units deploying all across Alameda County, with macro, with cutting police budgets, with like, there's just so many things that are happening because community organizing is like at its peak right now. People are like really getting plugged in and like super interested in this work. there's a lot of community members that don't have a voice or too scared to use their voice or don't have access to that. And so it's really important that we do that together, that we're supporting one another. Yeah, and just seeing like what organizing can do. It's really important to be just plugging into your community, because who's better to do that and make those decisions than us? We need them to listen to us.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And yes, I also just want to highlight something that was shared on the chat by Jean, that by state, it actually does vary, right? On like, and actually right now, from what he mentioned from the Marshall Project, 2 states, all prisoners are eligible to vote. So that's in Maine and Vermont. However, some prisoners in Mississippi, Alaska, and Alabama can vote while incarcerated, depending on their conviction. So I highly encourage everyone as well, and those folks who may know people who are currently incarcerated, to also check like the words of their state, because it does vary state by state. Unfortunately, just because of like time constraints for the purpose of this workshop, we're highlighting California, specifically Alameda County voting system. And also, yeah, like just talking a little bit about Cynthia, so what Cynthia shared, right? Like people power and how mobilization and organizing can really move movements. And it was shared by Mary, like on the chat, about the SB 823. You know, we ran a marathon for 10 hours the other day, and the proposition was then received, right? Which was a huge win for us. It's like, you know, it's just the beginning of the marathon, but I think having it received was also then just amplifies like the ways that everyone collectively came together for the push forward of that advocacy too. And in terms, also it was shared by like Oscar, also just like yeah, like movement power, and just like kind of like starting from that as well. I know that Natasha also like a little bit like talked a little bit about this, but I was wondering if you can add a little bit more, Natasha, on what is the importance of legislation, and almost also to like registration, restoring those voting rights as well.
Yeah, I think you know, a lot of it we've discussed, but you know, I'm really huge on really undoing the harm of our past and our history, because it has a direct implication on where we are today. So, you know, not just, so I would really just push the idea of that. This is, you know, this is our time to really, you know, we have more people who are able to vote. This is our time to really undo the harms that have been done to our communities. And, you know, power building, community building, just want to highlight that and strengthen that, build that up. And that's huge, hugely important.
Thank you so much, Natasha. And I'm going to go ahead and direct the question to John. How has Proposition 17 impacted your attitudes towards the voting system? I know you mentioned you haven't voted, in, you know, you haven't had the opportunity to vote, but having this proposition in place, has that changed any of your attitudes or just your perspective about voting?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, the Prop 17, it gave 50,000 people a right to vote here in the state, and myself being one of them, and I was recently released, so it really did change my mind, because as I said before, I didn't really give it too much thought. I thought that I would never be able to vote. Like there were times where I was miseducated and thought that once I was incarcerated, I would never be able to vote. So I never gave it much thought. So now that I'm finally able to vote, it does give me a lot of hope. It's being part of the JRC and being a member of All of Us Are None, who are instrumental in getting Prop 17 passed. It gives me a feeling of empowerment, and you know, it just I want to make sure that others who are in my position also know that, you know, they're able to vote now and they're able to make a difference collectively.
Thank you so much for that, John. That's beautiful. And almost I admire your strength as well, like Cynthia mentioned in the chat. We also just want to share, right? Proposition 17, it empowers those who didn't have the right, as well as like visibility. Visibility and representation is so important at such like a state and local level, right? Assuring that those rights are visible, that they do exist, that formerly incarcerated folks are also a part of the system as well. So I just want to also take this time to take everyone in the panel, from Cynthia to Natasha to John. Thank you so much for all of your cooperation and being a part of the panelists as well. So now we just want to highlight also this resource from the Young Women's Freedom Center, which essentially is a 25-page PDF that talks about everything and all of the resources we shared within this call. Like we mentioned, Mel from Young Women's Freedom Center has been super generous and also been super great and kind in regarding to like putting up this workshop as well. And we wanted to just give this resource to everyone as well to share within their communities, to kind of just like briefly hold over your phone on the QR code and it'll scan it and it'll direct you to the website, which essentially is, like I mentioned, the 25-page PDF, which has all of these resources that we talked about within the panel. It'll also give you sites on where to register to vote, how to find polling places, as well as your status for voting. So you just want to give this opportunity for everyone to have access to that. I'll also later on in the chat drop my email. So if you're unable to find these resources, feel free to email me so we can give you the GRCAC digital toolkit that has all of the different roles within Alameda County, from the DA to the sheriff to the public defenders and all of that, as well as this resource by the Young Women's Freedom Center. So again, I'm just gonna give space for 30 seconds for everyone to kind of just access this resource. Thank you, everyone. All right, hopefully that's enough time for everyone to access it. And like I mentioned, I'll drop my email in the chat as well. We also just want to highlight these various sites. I know that it's very lengthy and it's because they're websites. So feel free to take a snap right now if that's easier and more convenient and accessible. And again, we'll just give another 30 seconds for accessibility for these resources as well. Thank you, everyone. So that wraps up our political education campaign around voters' education. But I did want to open, before we leave, open it to everyone since we do have some free time. If I can pose a question of a word closing, so I'll direct it first to the panel and open it up to all the attendees of how you're initially just feeling, right? Just a one word that kind of encapsulates that. And I'll kick it off to Danny.
Yeah, thank you, Raylan. Yeah, I feel inspired and hopeful, that the traction that we're receiving, that hopefully that we're able to expand that voters' right eligibility to folks that are incarcerated, and to folks that are even undocumented as well.
Go ahead and popcorn it to someone, Danny. Thank you.
I'll go with Cynthia.
Thanks, Danny. I'm gonna say I'm feeling motivated. I'm feeling like we can get a lot done, and I'm excited that a lot of folks showed up and just ready to get things done. I'll pass it to John.
Yeah, I'm just feeling empowered and motivated also to help it empower everybody else too. And I'll pass it to Natasha.
So I too am feeling motivated and empowered. We're at such a critical moment in our history right now, and I'm just so empowered to be able to build up the capacity of our people. And yeah, I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling excited. I got a lot of feelings, y'all. But we're in this fight together.
And I'll go and pass it on to someone from the attendees as well, if you're open to sharing. Paul?
Hey, what's up? This is a great panel from all of the panelists. It was a great facilitator as well. My one word, this is just a one word, right? I'll choose activated. And I will pass it to David.
Hey, how you guys doing? David, Urban Peace Movement intern. Just want to thank you for all the information. And today's a crazy day. So I have different kind of thoughts jumping around. I got anger, I got optimism, and steadfastness. There you go. I got to send it off to Gene Moses.
Jean, I believe you're muted. Feel free to unmute. Thank you.
Thank you, Raylan. Jean Moses, Faith in Action East Bay, and I am feeling the need to collaborate and build bigger, stronger people power. And I'll pass it to Arabella.
Hi, I'm Arabella. I feel very educated from this workshop, and also kind of similar to what Jean was saying, I feel empowered to work on community building and organizing to build up people power. And I'll pass it to Brianna.
I'm feeling inspired and just ready to do stuff. I'll pass it to Paul.
Thank you, Brianna. I believe Paul has just gone, so I'll help you in passing it over. I'll pass it on to Oscar if he has a word of closing.
Spirited.
Thank you, Oscar. I'll pass it on to Mary.
It feels good. I feel mixed, but I feel good that I'm one of the older people on this call, that there's so many young people. So shout out to all the young people and especially the students that are here. Can I pass it to Jalen?
Hi, thank you. I really feel encouraged, just like knowing that these concepts are not broad. There are things that can be put into action and can really be done. So I guess I'll pass it to Mayela.
Hi, I'm Mayela. I just feel so inspired and motivated. It's just great to hear everybody's stories and all the education that you guys have to bring to the table. As a youth, it's important to learn how to community build and call to action. So yeah, thank you all. I'll pass it on to, let's see who hasn't gone. Terry.
Hi, Terry McWilliams, Faith in Action East Bay. Hard to say how I'm feeling. Trying not to be depressed today because I shouldn't be surprised. I'm not surprised, but encouraged that we're going in the right direction so that in 2022, I won't be surprised that the Democrats have maintained the House. And I'm on my phone, so I don't know who's next, Raylyn. Oh, and thank you to the panel and everybody who put this together. It's been a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Terry. I'll help passing it on. I'll pass it on to Jay if he's ready.
Oh, Jay, I just put it in the chat. But yeah, I just want to appreciate everyone. I feel really appreciative for everyone who shared. Very, very powerful. And just thank you, everyone. And I'm also feeling hungry because it's lunchtime. Check.
Thank you, Jay. I'll pass it on to the last two people. We have Kat or EJ.
I'll go. I also want to thank you. This is awesome. It's really well done. And I'm also, like a number of people here, having very mixed feelings. It's been a very up and down week. But this is inspiring, and I'm excited to start getting to work at home. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I do believe that EJ did share his post on the chat, which says empowering. And I just want to say before everyone hop off that we are working on our GRCAC site to kind of have all of these resources lived on. So if anyone in your community was not able to join today, we're going to share all of the resources when it's published and live on the chat. You have access to our slide deck, our agenda, as well as like the resources that we did share. So later on, like tentatively early 2022, we'll have that living on our site. So you'll be able to essentially have this like conversations, right? And even give these presentations within your own networks to just kind of gain that like that movement building, like we mentioned, right? Like electoral power, to know that everybody knows these resources exist, and also more so how to encourage and like reinstate their rights to vote. So just wanted to share that to everyone in the call today, that to watch out for the GRCAC, to follow us on our sites and also on our social media, because on our website, tentatively in early 2022, all of this will be able to be accessible to everyone. And I also dropped my email in the chat, so if you also want this now, I can also feel free to just share that with you as well. So thank you, everyone. We're going to stop the recording here. And we just want to say